If you move another inch, you'll regret it. Ethan Carter muttered, teeth clenched as the shuttle groaned, and sparks flew from the damaged console, the frigid wind of Zephyria IX whipping through the cracked viewport, slicing through his thin thermal jacket like knives. His boots skidded on the icy metal floor as he wrestled the controls, trying to steady the descent, the shuttle's warning lights flickering erratically and the oxygen indicator dipping dangerously low. Outside, the sky was a swirling orange and teal haze, storms of ionized particles dancing across the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows across the jagged, crystalline terrain below. The moment the shuttle's landing struts scraped the icy surface, a sheet of frost exploded beneath the thrusters, coating Ethan's face with stinging powder and making him stagger back, his pulse racing. He yanked himself free of the harness, muscles aching, and surveyed the wreckage around him. The shuttle leaned awkwardly, sparks still hissing from torn conduits, and a faint hum of energy from the damaged systems barely kept the cabin from plunging into darkness. Ethan pulled his jacket tighter, scanning the barren expanse through the fractured viewport, where jagged formations jutted like frozen teeth, the distant glow of ion storms illuminating paths of impossible terrain. He muttered under his breath, assessing his limited supplies, one oxygen pack, a thermal blanket, and a compact ration bar that would hardly last a full day. That's when movement caught his eye, a streak of copper light dancing across the orange-tinged snow. Instinctively, his hand went to the sidearm, but he hesitated. The figure emerged from behind a crystalline ridge, tall and fluid, every movement precise, the armor-like exoskeleton gleaming with a subtle iridescence that mirrored the stormy sky. Her eyes, golden and slitted like a predator's, locked onto him, and for a heartbeat, Ethan felt the full weight of being studied, evaluated, yet not yet attacked. "You're far from where you belong, human," her voice rang, melodious yet sharp, cutting through the wind like a chime of warning bells. Ethan raised his hand slightly, keeping the weapon low, choosing calm over confrontation. "Name's Ethan Carter. Shuttle's down. I don't want trouble, only shelter from the storm." She shifted, a cascade of teal-scaled armor sliding smoothly with her movements, the wind catching strands of her copper-red hair, making them flare like embers. Her gaze didn't waver, but something flickered, a trace of curiosity, or perhaps surprise at his steady composure. The storm outside raged louder, lightning arcs painting the sky in violent streaks. Yet inside the fractured cabin, the tension was a palpable weight pressing against Ethan's ribs. "I was sent to eliminate you," she admitted, almost reluctantly, voice carrying the edge of authority from a mission long rehearsed. Ethan swallowed, heart hammering, yet his own calm kept his breath steady. "And yet here you are, looking like you're reconsidering," he said, allowing a small, wry smile to show, not mockery, only an understanding of the absurdity. Her head tilted, eyes narrowing as she assessed him, the wind whistling through the gaps of her armor and the shuttle hull. "Why would a human not run, not fight, not plead?" she asked, her tone both challenge and wonder. Ethan's gaze met hers steadily. "Because sometimes doing the right thing doesn't come with an easy choice, and sometimes you find that the world is bigger than orders or missions." Silence stretched between them, filled with the hiss of the storm, the groan of stressed metal, and the scent of ionized snow. For a moment, she simply stared, then a subtle shift in her stance, a slight relaxation of her rigid posture, suggested that something inside her had shifted, a seed of doubt planted where certainty once ruled. Ethan scanned the horizon, plotting a path to higher ground, knowing he had to keep moving to survive. She followed his gaze, then back at him, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them, the first fragile spark of trust forming in the midst of chaos. The storm's fury around them echoing the inner storm of two beings from entirely different worlds, meeting in a suspended moment where life, choice, and understanding converged, and for the first time, the assassin's plans felt less certain, her sharp edges blunted by the undeniable humanity standing before her. The wind outside the fractured shuttle continued to howl, ice crystals swirling in chaotic spirals, yet inside the jagged cavity of the mountain, the temperature was just barely survivable. Ethan Carter moved carefully over the uneven floor, each step crunching against a mixture of snow and fractured metal shards, scanning for stable footing as the shuttle's hull groaned above them. Zyra followed, silent but deliberate, her golden eyes reflecting the faint light from the damaged control panels still flickering on the walls. Ethan tore a strip of fabric from his jacket, knotting it around a jagged shard to create a makeshift walking aid, and offered it to her without speaking, a gesture of pragmatism rather than politeness. She hesitated, then took it, examining the human ingenuity with a tilted head, her expression unreadable but her posture easing just slightly. The storm outside rattled against the cavity, a low, continuous drum, and Ethan pulled a small portable lamp from his pack, its soft glow casting long, dancing shadows across the crystalline walls, illuminating the irregularities of the cave and highlighting the unusual beauty of Zyra's scaled armor that shimmered faintly in response to the light. They began moving deeper into the natural tunnel, Ethan leading, careful to mark their path with small luminous beacons he could retrieve later, each footstep measured, conscious of the need for both speed and safety. Zyra's stride matched his, precise and calculated, though occasionally she would glance at him, curiosity glinting in her gaze, assessing, measuring, yet not hostile. The silence between them was punctuated only by the soft hiss of the storm wind sneaking through fissures and the distant rumble of shifting ice, a reminder that the world outside remained unforgiving. Ethan spoke finally, voice low but firm. "We need shelter from the wind. I can ration what I have, and we can find higher ground where the temperature is more stable." Zyra did not respond immediately, her eyes scanning the cave, the small metal fragments reflecting light like stars, her stance showing trust not yet earned but considered. They moved steadily, Ethan showing small patches of floor that were free of ice, hand gestures indicating safe paths, and Zyra following without hesitation, adapting to the rhythms of his movement, the syncopation of their footsteps a tentative cooperation. At one point, Ethan paused near a narrow ledge, pointing to a jagged overhang that would provide temporary cover from a burst of the storm that roared through a nearby fissure, and Zyra inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the utility without words, her body relaxing incrementally as they found a place to stop. Ethan unpacked the small ration bar, offering a portion without fanfare, and Zyra accepted, consuming it with careful attention to her surroundings, eyes occasionally flicking to him, noting not just his actions, but the absence of fear or panic. The lamp's glow revealed subtle shifts in her expression, a softening that contrasted with the tension in her posture when they had first met. Hours passed in this silent rhythm, the storm outside unabated but their temporary haven providing a fragile sense of safety. As the wind howled, Ethan adjusted a broken panel of the shuttle debris to shield the entrance, the soft clink of metal against metal a quiet melody in the larger chaos. Zyra watched him, the first hints of something resembling respect or curiosity flickering in her features, a recognition of a humanity that operated not by protocol or mission but by choice and reason. Ethan's gaze met hers, steady and unflinching, and for the first time in the long hours since the crash, the storm outside seemed a distant threat rather than an immediate terror, both of them caught in a moment where survival was shared and unspoken understanding began to form between a human from Earth and a being from a distant world. The dim glow of the makeshift lamp reflected off the icy walls of the cavern as Ethan Carter and Zyra paused briefly, catching their breath and listening to the distant roar of the storm outside. The temperature had dropped further, each gust of wind that found its way into the shelter slicing through layers of clothing and armor with sharp precision, reminding them of the hostile world beyond their fragile haven. Ethan crouched near a narrow fissure, adjusting the lamp to illuminate more of the jagged floor, and noticed small traces of alien flora clinging stubbornly to the crevices, bioluminescent in the dim light, casting soft green and violet patterns across Zyra's scaled armor. She moved beside him, silent, her eyes flicking over every detail, observing the subtle movements of his hands, the careful placement of his feet, and the methodical way he assessed their environment, her mind beginning to catalog his behavior not as prey or threat, but as someone capable of ingenuity and adaptation. Ethan offered her a small ration bar from his pack, unwrapping it slowly so as not to startle her, and she took it, consuming it with quiet deliberation, her eyes never leaving his face, a silent acknowledgement that the act was understood and appreciated without need for words. He continued to survey the cavern, running a hand along the jagged wall, noting the natural grooves and indentations that could provide temporary seating or support for the night, and suggested that they both use them to rest while keeping an eye on potential weak points in the shelter. Zyra inclined her head slightly, a gesture of agreement, and lowered herself carefully onto one of the flatter surfaces, the gentle click of her armor settling against the stone echoing softly in the enclosed space. Ethan positioned himself nearby, adjusting his pack and using a small folded blanket to create an improvised cushion, the subtle scent of earth and ozone filling the space around them. The silence settled, broken only by the occasional hiss of wind or the distant rumble of shifting ice, and a strange sense of shared purpose began to take root. Zyra's gaze softened as she observed Ethan organizing his minimal supplies, making mental notes of his resourcefulness, the calm determination he exhibited in a setting that would unsettle most, and for the first time, she considered that her mission might no longer align with the unfolding reality before her. Ethan broke the quiet with a low, steady voice, discussing potential routes to higher ground once the storm eased, his words practical and unembellished, yet carrying a quiet authority that did not demand compliance, but suggested partnership. Zyra listened, her head tilting slightly as she processed the information, her body language shifting imperceptibly toward a tentative openness, the edges of tension in her posture smoothing as she recognized the lack of threat in his tone. Hours passed as they settled into the rhythm of cautious cooperation, Ethan occasionally adjusting the lamp to reduce shadows and improve visibility, Zyra responding with subtle shifts in stance, the occasional tilt of her head, the way she mirrored his movements just enough to indicate trust being built through observation rather than declaration. The storm outside remained relentless, but within the cavern, the atmosphere transformed into a fragile sanctuary where both human and alien began to reconcile the disparity of their worlds, the shared need for safety and survival laying the groundwork for understanding and the first sparks of mutual respect emerging from the silence. Morning light filtered through the jagged openings of the cavern, casting pale golden streaks across the icy floor and reflecting off Zyra's teal-scaled armor, giving her a subtle, almost ethereal glow. Ethan Carter shifted the portable lamp closer to a small alcove, uncovering a cluster of naturally formed benches and a shallow pool of melted ice, perfect for resting and planning their next move. The storm outside had softened, replaced by a thin veil of wind carrying a faint smell of ozone and snow, and Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. He scanned their surroundings, noting the jagged formations that could provide cover and identifying a narrow ledge along the cavern wall that appeared to rise toward a plateau above, likely a safer vantage point once the ice had hardened enough to support movement. Zyra remained silent beside him, her golden eyes moving deliberately, taking in the details of the cavern with a mixture of calculation and cautious curiosity. Ethan offered her a small thermal ration, unwrapping it slowly so as not to startle her, and she accepted it, nodding slightly in appreciation, the gesture establishing a subtle connection that had begun to grow since the crash. He crouched to examine a patch of uneven floor, pointing out areas that might shift under weight, and she followed his gestures, mirroring his movements with a precision that was instinctive yet attentive. Ethan adjusted the lamp to illuminate the upper reaches of the cavern, and for the first time, he could see the complex patterns of ice and rock overhead, the way the jagged ceiling cast intricate shadows that danced across the walls, a reminder of the world's relentless unpredictability. "We will need to move slowly when we leave," he said, voice low but firm. "One misstep could send either of us sliding into the lower crevices." Zyra inclined her head, acknowledging the wisdom in his words, her posture relaxing as she allowed a moment of trust to form. They sat in silence for a time, the faint sound of dripping ice and the residual hum of the storm outside filling the cavern, and Ethan took the opportunity to run his hands over a small bundle of supplies he had managed to salvage, organizing rations and tools with meticulous care, every motion deliberate, providing a sense of order in the chaos surrounding them. Zyra watched, her gaze softening imperceptibly as she considered his careful attention to detail, recognizing not just survival instinct but a calm, consistent logic that had guided his every step since the crash. As the morning progressed, the thin light grew warmer, casting long reflections across the pool of melted ice, and Ethan gestured toward the narrow ledge above, indicating a possible route to safer ground, his hand movements clear and unhurried, demonstrating both caution and strategy. Zyra followed his indication with her eyes, studying the path silently, then shifted slightly, placing a hand against the icy wall to test its stability, a quiet acknowledgement that she was willing to trust his judgment. The rhythm of their interaction became a subtle dance, both of them moving in measured steps, communicating without words, the cavern itself a partner in their cooperation, and for the first time, the harsh, alien environment began to feel like a space where understanding and careful coordination could create a temporary sanctuary, a place where the human and the alien could reconcile the vast differences of their worlds through observation, care, and mutual attention, setting the stage for the next movement beyond the cavern walls. The afternoon sun filtered weakly through the cavern's fractured roof, casting a muted golden light across the icy floor and creating delicate reflections in the shallow pools that had formed from the melting snow. Ethan Carter carefully adjusted his lamp to illuminate a narrow path along the cavern wall, pointing out small areas of uneven ice and rock that might trip them if they were not cautious. Zyra followed closely, her golden eyes scanning the floor with meticulous attention, the teal shimmer of her scaled armor catching the light and giving her a subtle glow that contrasted with the muted tones of the cavern. Ethan pulled a small thermal blanket from his pack, spreading it over a low ledge to provide a makeshift seat, and gestured for Zyra to rest, an act of consideration that spoke more than words ever could. She inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the gesture, and carefully settled onto the blanket, the movement smooth yet tentative as she tested the stability of the icy surface beneath her. Ethan took a seat nearby, arranging his modest supplies in orderly stacks, ration bars, a small water purifier, and a compact toolkit salvaged from the shuttle wreckage. The quiet crackle of the lamp and the distant whistle of wind through fissures filled the cavern, a gentle rhythm that seemed to bridge the gap between the alien and human presence. Ethan spoke softly, outlining potential routes to higher ground and safe passage points that avoided unstable ice, his voice steady and calm, providing reassurance that contrasted with the unpredictable environment outside. Zyra listened attentively, occasionally tilting her head to inspect a suggested route, her expression reflecting a blend of curiosity and cautious trust. The two moved through a series of small, coordinated gestures, pointing to irregular floor sections, adjusting handholds on icy walls, and marking potential hazards with small luminous tags. The silence between them was filled with an unspoken understanding, a growing sense of shared responsibility as they navigated the cavern together. As they paused to rest, Ethan offered a portion of water, which Zyra accepted, sipping carefully while observing his actions, the gesture forming another subtle layer of connection. Light shifted as the sun continued its slow path, casting longer shadows and revealing additional features of the cavern, small crevices and natural alcoves that could provide temporary shelter or observation points. Ethan noted each detail aloud, his words measured and descriptive, while Zyra responded with precise movements and attentive observation, mirroring his care without need for explanation. The hours passed in this synchronized rhythm, the storm outside now a faint whisper, and within the cavern, the human and alien developed a fragile sense of teamwork and understanding. They shared space, resources, and attentiveness, the differences in physiology and culture acknowledged, but secondary to the immediate necessity of survival. In these quiet, deliberate actions, a foundation of mutual trust and respect emerged, a subtle acknowledgement that their cooperation was not just pragmatic but essential, and that the storm, though still raging beyond the cavern walls, had become a backdrop to the beginnings of connection between two beings from vastly different worlds. The late afternoon light deepened into a soft amber glow that filtered through the fissures in the cavern ceiling, painting long streaks across the icy floor and highlighting the intricate patterns etched into Zyra's scaled armor. Ethan Carter shifted his position, using a small piece of salvaged metal to steady a loose section of floor, his movements deliberate and methodical, showing care not only for his own safety, but for hers as well. Zyra observed silently, her golden eyes following each motion, noting the precision in his actions and the absence of hesitation, a subtle respect beginning to form in her gaze. Ethan spoke softly, his voice calm and steady, explaining potential routes to higher ground and the timing they would need to navigate patches of fragile ice and sharp protrusions along the cavern walls. Each suggestion measured with practicality rather than command. Zyra tilted her head, her expression curious yet thoughtful, as she considered his words, adapting her own movements to align with his guidance, the unspoken rhythm of coordination forming between them. He offered her a small sip from his water pack, and she accepted with careful attention, the simple act reinforcing the trust developing in this shared space. Ethan adjusted the portable lamp, casting a wider arc of light to reveal subtle changes in the cavern's surface, emphasizing areas of stability and potential risk, and Zyra moved in tandem with his gestures, her body language easing as she followed his lead. The silence between them was filled with the quiet hum of the lamp, the faint drip of melting ice, and the occasional distant rumble of shifting snow, creating a backdrop of ambient sound that underscored the fragile intimacy of their cooperation. Ethan paused to examine a natural ledge that could serve as a vantage point, pointing out the subtle gradients that would allow both of them to ascend without unnecessary strain, his instructions precise yet gentle, guiding rather than commanding. Zyra's movements mirrored his, her attention to detail evident in the careful placement of her hands and feet, and her eyes lifted to meet his briefly, a flicker of acknowledgement passing between them that required no words. The atmosphere in the cavern shifted subtly, the combined warmth of shared effort and the growing sense of mutual reliance tempering the chill in the air, a quiet harmony emerging from the calculated motions and careful observation. Ethan continued to check and organize their limited supplies, demonstrating resourcefulness and planning, while Zyra watched, absorbing not just the actions but the thought behind them, understanding that his calm efficiency was rooted in genuine concern rather than mere survival instinct. Hours passed in this synchrony, the storm outside gradually subsiding to a distant whisper, and within the cavern, the human and alien navigated the space with growing confidence, their collaboration a testament to observation, respect, and the beginnings of understanding that transcended the differences of their worlds, forming a foundation for the deeper connection that would guide them beyond the immediate safety of the cavern. The cavern walls grew warmer in the dim glow of the late afternoon, the amber light reflecting off icy surfaces and casting elongated shadows that shifted with the flicker of Ethan Carter's portable lamp. He crouched beside a natural alcove, carefully examining a patch of loose rock that could destabilize the narrow ledge they planned to use to ascend higher into the plateau. Zyra moved silently beside him, her golden eyes alert, scanning the surrounding area for any hidden risks, every subtle movement of her body demonstrating a practiced awareness of balance and space. Ethan pointed to a slight overhang above, indicating the safest route, and she followed without hesitation, testing each step with precise, deliberate motions that mirrored his own caution. He paused to adjust a piece of broken metal, fashioning a small brace that would support the fragile ice beneath their feet, and handed it to Zyra without comment. She took it carefully, her scaled hands accepting the human's improvisation with quiet acknowledgement, an unspoken understanding passing between them. The faint hiss of melting ice and the distant murmur of residual wind filled the cavern, the ambient sounds forming a rhythm that seemed to synchronize with the cautious pace of their movements. Ethan carefully rationed a portion of water, offering it to Zyra, who accepted it with steady hands, drinking deliberately while her eyes remained fixed on his, observing not just the act but the consideration behind it. The amber light grew deeper, revealing intricate patterns of mineral deposits on the walls that shimmered subtly, and Ethan used the illumination to plan the next stretch of their route, indicating handholds and stable patches with precise gestures. Zyra mirrored his attention to detail, her body language gradually relaxing as she allowed herself to trust his judgment, the tension from the first encounter fading into a focused cooperation. As they navigated a particularly narrow section, Ethan adjusted the lamp to cast light upward, revealing a series of ledges that would allow them to climb to a more secure vantage point, and Zyra followed, moving with careful precision, her movements synchronized with his guidance. They paused at the top of a small rise, catching their breath and surveying the cavern below, a shared sense of achievement settling between them. The storm outside had become a distant roar, its threat tempered by the security of the elevated position. Ethan checked their supplies and repositioned the lamp to illuminate a broader section, highlighting potential hazards and routes of retreat, and Zyra observed silently, her posture open and attentive, the initial sharpness in her demeanor softened by respect and cautious curiosity. The cavern's features, once stark and forbidding, now seemed like a map of opportunity, each twist and alcove offering possibilities for movement and temporary shelter. And both human and alien moved through the space with an unspoken coordination, their actions deliberate and measured, forming a fragile alliance born of necessity, trust, and growing understanding that survival required more than skill. It required awareness, cooperation, and the careful weaving together of two very different worlds into a shared, stable rhythm. The soft glow of the cavern shifted as the sun began its descent, streaks of amber and pale orange lighting the jagged walls, reflecting off the ice to create a kaleidoscope of subtle colors. Ethan Carter moved deliberately, checking the stability of the ledge that would allow them to descend toward the plateau above, his fingers brushing over uneven stone to test support, each motion precise and measured. Zyra followed, her golden eyes tracking every detail, her scaled hands finding purchase on secure surfaces, her posture relaxed yet vigilant. Ethan paused to reposition the lamp, casting wider light across the space, revealing a path that wound carefully around crystalline formations and pools of meltwater. He pointed out a sequence of steps that minimized the risk of slipping, demonstrating patience and clarity, and Zyra nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement of both the logic and care in his planning. As they progressed, a faint breeze carried the scent of ionized snow from the storm outside, mingling with the faint metallic tang of the cavern, and Ethan adjusted his movements to shield the lamp and maintain clear visibility. Zyra mirrored him without prompting, moving with precision and attentiveness, the initial edge of caution in her demeanor softened by trust and observation. At a natural alcove along the route, Ethan paused and gestured to a series of small protrusions that could serve as resting points, and Zyra crouched to examine them, confirming their stability before settling briefly, the action establishing a subtle rhythm of cooperation. Ethan took the opportunity to organize the remaining rations and water, sharing a measured portion with Zyra, who accepted it calmly, her eyes meeting his with a quiet recognition of the shared reliance that had developed. The cavern, once imposing and alien, now felt navigable, each step guided by the careful assessment of both beings, the ambient sounds of dripping water and distant shifting ice, providing a steady, grounding backdrop. As the light deepened further, Ethan indicated the final stretch toward a higher section of the plateau, outlining a careful sequence of steps and handholds, his instructions clear, deliberate, and respectful of Zyra's independence and capability. She moved in response, testing each hold, adjusting her weight with practiced control, and together they made slow but steady progress, the sense of tension gradually giving way to a shared focus and mutual understanding. Moments of quiet reflection passed, punctuated by the gentle crackle of the lamp and the subtle hum of the cavern, and in those intervals, both human and alien registered the significance of their collaboration, the careful navigation and attentive gestures forming an unspoken bond. Ethan glanced at Zyra as they reached the plateau, the soft light catching the iridescence of her scaled armor, and he recognized a shift in her posture, a tentative acceptance of the humanity and thoughtfulness guiding his actions. Zyra, in turn, allowed herself to trust the human's judgment fully, her initial mission and preconceptions softened by the tangible evidence of cooperation, planning, and deliberate care, and in that suspended moment above the cavern, a profound understanding emerged between them, bridging worlds, species, and expectations. The silent acknowledgement of mutual reliance and the quiet power of choice forming the threshold for the steps they would take together beyond the plateau. The sun dipped low beyond the plateau, casting long, golden shafts of light across the icy expanse, and setting the crystalline walls of the cavern ablaze with warm reflections that danced across Zyra's teal-scaled armor. Ethan Carter stood near the edge of the ledge, his eyes scanning the horizon, noting the subtle contours of distant rock formations and the faint shimmer of snow fields that glowed under the fading light. Zyra moved beside him, her movements deliberate, almost cautious, yet with a grace that spoke of both strength and careful observation. They had reached a vantage point from which the cavern and the surrounding terrain could be fully surveyed, the earlier storm now a soft whisper in the distance, leaving a serene hush that contrasted with the chaotic hours that had preceded. Ethan gestured toward a distant ridge, outlining a path that would provide both safety and a clear route toward any potential help. His instructions calm and precise, demonstrating not only his practical understanding of the terrain, but also a subtle care for Zyra's comfort and safety. She followed his gaze, eyes bright with curiosity and consideration. The tension that had once marked her posture eased into an attentiveness that reflected a growing recognition of his judgment and reliability. Ethan offered a portion of their remaining water, and she accepted it without hesitation, the quiet act solidifying the trust that had developed through hours of shared effort and observation. As the light shifted and shadows grew longer, the two paused, listening to the faint echoes of the cavern and the soft crackle of residual ice settling, each sound a reminder of the fragile equilibrium between themselves and the environment. Ethan spoke softly, reflecting on the choices that had brought them to this point, his words measured, emphasizing patience and awareness, while Zyra listened, absorbing not only the practical advice, but the underlying humanity in his voice. Together, they moved carefully along the ledge, each step a deliberate combination of caution and confidence, the rhythm of their actions in sync, unspoken communication guiding their coordination. The cavern's features, illuminated now in the warm glow, revealed small alcoves and gentle slopes that provided natural seating and observation points, and Ethan demonstrated each with careful gestures, showing not only how to use the space, but how to maintain balance and safety in an environment that demanded constant attention. Zyra mirrored his attentiveness, adjusting her stance, testing surfaces with subtle movements, and their shared vigilance created a sense of mutual reliance and quiet understanding that transcended words. As the sun finally disappeared beyond the horizon, casting the plateau in a soft twilight, both human and alien paused to take in the view. The cavern below now bathed in soft shadows, distant formations catching the last glimmer of light, and the sky above a tapestry of muted colors. In that suspended moment, Ethan and Zyra exchanged a look, golden eyes meeting human brown, a silent acknowledgement of trust, cooperation, and the unexpected connection that had formed between two beings from entirely different worlds. The wind whispered across the plateau, carrying with it the faint scent of melted ice and distant snow, and for the first time since the crash, both recognized a profound stillness, a sense that their choices and efforts had created not only safety, but understanding, a fragile bridge between species that hinted at what could be achieved when observation, care, and empathy guided action in the vast, unpredictable expanse of Zephyria IX.